This video is brought to you by viewers like you. Thanks for letting me do this for so long. If knowledge is power, then secrets are the locks that guard it. Video game developers spend years crafting their biggest projects behind layers of security and secrecy, but sometimes all it takes is one crack in the system for everything to spill out and for there to be an incredible mess to clean up. We're not talking about a screenshot or a teaser. Some leaks have completely blown the lid off of gaming's biggest surprises. Entire games have leaked years before release, unfinished prototypes revealing hidden mechanics, even source code stolen straight from developers' servers. And the fallout? Delayed launches, scrapped projects, and massive scary lawsuits. That is the task today as we look at the most infamous leaks in video game history, moments that changed the industry forever and prove that sometimes no secret is ever truly safe. Who needs a marketing team when a hacker will drop the whole game for free? Sequels are often the main targets for leaks. That does make a fair amount of sense because with a sequel there is increased levels of hype and expectations and almost this kind of unwritten, unspoken demand for leaks. The Last of Us Part 2 was one of the most anticipated games of the last decade after the first game was so damn good. Pretty much as soon as that first trailer dropped, people were beside themselves with excitement and the hype just built from there. We would once again have a new The Last of Us game, which would be a huge story-driven experience that would win all the awards, and everyone would be very, very happy and there wouldn't be any arguing whatsoever. That might have happened, but then April 2020 changed everything, and not because of like COVID and lockdowns. There was other stuff going on as well. Just 2 months before the game's release, there was a significant leak posted online. Major cutscenes ended up on YouTube, including the big spoiler of the game. Should I spoil it now? It has been 5 years. You know what, the HBO show is gonna have to spoil it eventually, so I might as well just spoil it now. Joel's death is the biggest twist in the whole game, and the leak put it front and center and spoiled it before the game came out. It kind of reminds you of the people who spoiled the last couple of Harry Potter books before they came out. They just kind of rode around and were genuinely kind of terrible people, but, you know, secretly kind of funny, I suppose. As soon as this happened, there weren't any concrete explanations for it, but I remember there were early rumors that the leak came from a disgruntled Naughty Dog employee who was upset at poor working conditions. Sony later moved to confirm that it wasn't an internal leak and instead a hacker who exploited Naughty Dog security to access the files. Honestly, it kinda didn't matter who did it, the damage was done and this information was out there. An interesting knock-on effect is that obviously fans rushed to watch the leaks online, but the outcome and the nature of the leaks divided the fanbase significantly. Many fans were naturally upset about Joel's death and began review bombing The Last of Us Part 2, which, may I remind you, hadn't even come out yet. Granted, the final game adds a lot more context, but for many players their minds were already made up by their first impressions of this scene. Ultimately, The Last of Us Part 2 is a story-driven game despite all of the realistic environments and the combat, and a leaked spoiler for the script can devastate momentum before release. And you know what, a lot of those early trailers did try to show off the environments and the combat, and people were excited to see that, but I think people were most excited to see how the story would continue. It meant that overnight, Naughty Dog and Sony had to completely rethink their marketing to rebuild some of the hype that had been lost. And it kinda worked, because The Last of Us Part 2 sold really well, but its launch was overshadowed by this leak. There was no real financial cost, but many fans had the experience ruined for them. Remember, this was during COVID, so it was an uncertain time for game releases as it was, but having this thrown into the mix as well must have been very difficult to deal with by the executives at Sony and Naughty Dog. But it's fine, the game did well, and now we've got a remastered edition, and all I'm wondering is that, do you reckon they would have remastered it again if the remaster had leaks too? Neil Druckmann just lives in his own world, anything's possible. So if leaks are a sign of how loose a company is with their secrets, then Nintendo should be fine because they don't really tell anyone anything. Unless it's the Switch 2, since most of that got leaked by retailers weeks and months before the official announcement, and when the official announcement dropped, everyone was like, oh, yeah, we kinda already knew that. However, just 5 years ago, Nintendo had the biggest leak in their history. A leak so massive, so gargantuan, it kinda made up for decades of tight security. We're still in 2020, and in July, Nintendo had its Gigaleak. which is a hell of a name, but very apt considering just how much stuff was leaked here. We're talking decades of secret Nintendo files that were dumped online. It's less about spoiling upcoming games and more about the older games. What we got here was an absolute goldmine of unseen history, unused game content, early prototypes, internal emails at Nintendo, pretty much anything you could have wanted from the last 20, 30 years of Nintendo history. There were early prototypes for Ocarina of Time, Super Mario 64, and Pokemon that reveal just how different these games were in their very early stages. Pokemon was there, but you shouldn't confuse it with the Pokemon leak from last year, where Typhlosion has sex with a human. It's very different vibes here. You still had beta versions of Gold and Silver and the source codes for Super Mario World and Yoshi's Island, which people have been after for absolutely ages. Genuinely one of the biggest video game data breaches ever, exposing decades of internal secrets Nintendo never wanted the public to see. It kind of feels like one of those clickbait video titles where Nintendo never wanted you to see it, but it is genuinely true. It showed Nintendo's behind the scenes in a way that was never really expected to be made public, while also giving gaming historians genuinely years and years of information to pick through and, take out the good bits. On the flip side, it was also a pretty massive invasion of privacy for Nintendo employees, so, it's not all good news, but, you take the good and the bad. Hopefully no one was seriously doxxed, I don't think they were. While all this was happening in 2020, Nintendo refused to comment or acknowledge that any information had been leaked. More than likely, they would have quietly increased security to prevent anything like this from ever happening again, but publicly, they didn't even acknowledge it. Although they did issue takedowns to prevent files being shared online, but frankly, when files are online, you can't stop fans from duplicating them and analysing them. And hey, we're 5 years down the road, we're still coming through the Gigaleak and we're still finding new things about it. Ultimately, it's a historical event in gaming history that has forever changed how we view Nintendo's past, and massive invasion of privacy aside, it's kind of a good thing for preserving historical information about games. Hopefully we don't find out that Bowser did the nasty with any humans. Oh wait. Any anticipated sequel is likely to be leaked ahead of time. We saw what it was like with The Last of Us Part 2, and sure enough, you apply that to any game that people are incredibly excited about, and people are going to want to leak it. And if you thought people were excited about The Last of Us Part 2, you clearly haven't been paying attention to how people feel about Grand Theft Auto 6. You may have noticed that at the time of writing, GTA 6 hasn't come out yet, and considering we're talking about leaks, it's now quite hard to talk about it. Discussing leaks for a game that hasn't been released runs the risk of legal action, and considering I like to eat food and keep my legs, I'm going to be very careful with how I talk about GTA 6. The leak of September 2022 was one of the biggest leaks for any game in active development. That's the key distinction here. A lot of leaks are for games that are very nearly finished or for historical games and source code and that sort of stuff. But in September 2022, over 90 gameplay clips of an early build of the game were posted online by a hacker. It gave first confirmation of the game's settings, character, direction, a lot of major decisions, and many of these Rockstar were not ready to share yet. Among the leaked stuff, we had confirmation that Lucia is the franchise's first female protagonist alongside a male partner, and that the game is set in Vice City. We also had very early versions of gun combat and how Vice City looks in current gen. Initially, no one had any idea where this leak came from before a 17-year-old from the UK took credit for it. I don't know if I should be proud, I don't think I should be proud actually. He gained access through Rockstar's internal communications and circulated the footage within hours, which is kind of frightening to think about. He even blackmailed Rockstar by threatening to leak more. Rockstar released a statement condemning the leak and expressing their disappointment, but they stated that development would continue as normal. Weirdly, this leak had corners of the internet upset how GTA 6 looked despite it being a really early version of the game. To prove a point, other developers showed public support and shared early builds of their own games to highlight just how much work really goes into AAA development. So what we should learn is that leaks are good for nothing except some weird version of true crime drama in a video game industry. Is this a true crime video by accident? Do I have to start doing my makeup or something? Clearly, something was happening in 2020 because The Last of Us 2 wasn't the only game held hostage by a leak. I know I've already made this joke, I don't think it was COVID, I don't think COVID made people more likely to leak a game, but, you know, do you reckon people were just bored and, you know, wanted to just leak a video game? I don't know. In late 2020, Capcom were victims of a huge ransomware attack. If you don't know, a ransomware attack is where a hacker encrypts someone's data and demands a ransom, usually money, in order to not leak the data to the internet. Capcom refused to budge and the leak went ahead, but the scope of the leak could never have been anticipated. It was later revealed that Capcom refused to pay a reported $11 million in Bitcoin. Their prize, as it was kind of an incredible amount of stuff that ended up getting leaked. It wasn't just Resident Evil Village that was leaked, although it hadn't been revealed yet, so that was taken away from Capcom, and RE7 had a pretty significant reveal when that came out, so that's a pretty costly thing to happen. Not to mention the ransomware attack also revealed a lot of key plot points from the game, and the ending, and even Lady Dimitrescu was shown before her time. That feels like sacrilege. But yeah, it wasn't just Resident Evil Village, since this ransomware attack came for everything that Capcom had in the pipeline at the time. It includes early mentions of Dragon's Dogma 2 and Street Fighter 6, and there's tons of leaked emails, financial information, employee information, just all sorts of private stuff that should never see the light of day. In the end, 1 terabyte of information was stolen, which is just a shocking number, really. Capcom's marketing for these games was shot to pieces and they basically had to start from scratch. All this stolen information highlighted one of the worst security incidents in gaming history. It somehow affected game development, Capcom's finances, the safety of customer information, future projects, somehow all at the same time. However, against all odds, the games that were affected by the attack still ended up being commercial hits, although Capcom did have a lot of trust to rebuild. The ransomware attack highlighted how vulnerable even major publishers are to cyber attacks. A worrying precedent had been set for using the threat of leaking information as a way of blackmailing even a massive company into doing what you want. Capcom may have recovered, but it could have easily destroyed a smaller company. The 21st century now means that we can have digital hostages. Oh man, the future is fun, isn't it? The last stop on our Sequels Are Perfect for Hackers tour takes us decades back in time. You might think that leaks are a current day thing, and while they're definitely more common, they have been around for ages. Pretty much as long as there's been shareable digital files. If anything, older leaks had fewer measures in place to safeguard against data breaches, so anyone who wanted to leak a game had almost free reign to do so. For the OG game leak, you'd have to head back to 2003. Most likely back at a time when the world was fully accepting that Half-Life 1 is amazing, and now Valve are making a sequel. You might not remember a time when Valve used to make sequels, but when they did, they were pretty damn good at it. Your Team Fortress 2, your Portal 2, your Left 4 Dead 2, the best one is usually the sequel. Early trailers seemed promising, and it looked like Half-Life 2 would be a real landmark game release in 2003. However, if you know your gaming history, you might know that Half-Life 2 actually came out in 2004, so what the hell happened there? Strap the fuck in, it's story time! In 2002, a young German programmer called Axel Gember decided to hack into Valve's network to see what info he could find out about this upcoming sequel. He got in, surprisingly, because Valve's security was horrendously bad, and he just started rooting around, seeing what he could find. He was in Valve systems for so long and got so comfortable without being detected that Axel naturally got a little curious and decided to dig a little deeper. This is when he found the source code for Half-Life 2, which is like the entire DNA of a game, in case you're not completely sure. Axel decided to download this to his personal computer, and his friend later uploaded it online for all to see. Which was not only a pretty massive day to be on the internet, but also a time when Valve were sent into absolute panic mode, as you probably would be. Like, I know the GTA 6 leak was bad, but imagine instead of like gameplay clips, we had the source code for GTA 6. Valve were desperate and decided to ask the public for help tracking down who had hacked their system before eventually getting the FBI involved. The story from there goes that they found out who it was and then set a trap for Axel since he had then applied to work at Valve, and law enforcement saw the opportunity, told them to accept the application since they had a case on him. He was arrested but not charged since he cooperated and didn't profit from the leak. Meanwhile at Valve, they were freaking the fuck out big time. A leak as big and as damaging as this meant that Valve had to do something, and the decision was to delay Half-Life 2 by over a year. The leak was so comprehensive that it showed off an early version of the source engine which hackers were picking apart like vultures, and there was this weird scenario where cheats were being made for Half-Life 2 before its release. Obviously Half-Life 2 recovered, and it may have even benefited from additional time in the oven, but there was a moment where Valve were seriously debating cancelling the game altogether. It gave rise to numerous legal and ethical debates at a time when video game leaks weren't anywhere near as commonplace as they are now. It also helped to shape a lot of online security, since the world could see just how fragile digital projects were without a proper safeguard. Any leak that came after this is always compared to that one time when the most anticipated game of the moment had its entire source code leaked online. Just goes to show that things can indeed get so much worse.